Hey guys, so today we will be talking about forces on the lung system. So there are actually a few forces that actually acts on the lungs, which actually enables the lungs to expand as well as contract. So before we move on and talk about the forces on the lung system, I would like to just announce a simple conversion of the pressure units. So the first one is 1 cm H2O is equivalent to 0.74 mmHg, whereas 1 mmHg is equivalent to 1.36 cm H2O. Okay, so moving on to the forces on the lung system. So here we have a diagram of the lungs. So now I'll be explaining about this diagram first. So the first one is we have this alveolus. Okay, this is the alveolus. This is actually the trachea and bronchus. Okay, in this case we are actually going to see all the alveoli as one big alveolus. So just for your additional information, the average size of one small alveolus is actually equivalent to 100 micrometer diameter. Okay, and that is actually about the lungs, the alveolus. Now we're gonna, this one is actually the lungs. The one in the white color is actually the lungs. This one, the one in the red color, is actually the surface of the lungs. The green color here is actually the visceral pleura, and the blue color lining here is actually the parietal pleura. The one which I have actually made this zigzag pattern all over between the green and the blue here is actually this pleural fluid. And what about this? This is actually referring to the ribs. Okay, and this cavity is also known as the intrapleural cavity. The ribs are always attached to the parietal pleura. Okay, so that is all about this diagram. Now I'm going to talk about this diagram here. Okay, so I'll start from outside. This is actually the ribs. This one is actually the parietal pleura, the blue color. This one is actually the visceral pleura, the black outline with this white. This one, the white surface, and this one is actually the intrapleural cavity where we'll actually have this pleural fluid. And this one is actually the lungs, the surface of the lungs, and this one is actually referring to the fluid. This one is actually the alveolus, one big alveolus, as I have mentioned before. And this green color, this dark green color inside the alveolus is actually referring to the fluid in alveolus. In every alveolus we'll actually have this fluid, and we will talk about this fluid, what is the function of this fluid later on, probably in the next few lectures. And here we also have this, what is this, like kink-like fiber. This one is also known as elastin and collagen fibers. Okay, so these elastin and collagen fibers, in its resting state, it will always remain contracted such that the lungs will always try to shrink. As the lungs expand, the elastin and collagen will actually get stretched. As you can see here, it is actually getting stretched. So eventually it will produce a recoil force which is actually relaxing. So when you are actually stretching it and eventually you release it, it's just like a rubber band. When you actually stretch it, it will actually become stretched, and when you release, it will actually get relaxed and eventually become shrinks back, because the natural force of the lungs is it always tries to shrink because of this elastin and collagen fibers. There's also another force which is actually inside the alveolus, which I will be talking about in a while. Okay, so here the pleural fluid. Okay, the pleural fluid is always subjected to both opposite force. Okay, I'll talk about this in a while. Okay, first of all, there are actually two forces that actually acts on the lungs. First of all, the inward force that always tries to collapse the lungs, which is provided by the total recoil. The recoil of the lungs it actually can be divided into two, 1/3 as well as 2/3. The 1/3 of the total recoil of the lungs is due to the lung tissue constituents such as collagen and elastin fibers. As I mentioned before, this elastin and collagen fibers will always try to relax, right? So this force is actually contributing to 1/3 of the total force that is actually trying to shrink the lungs. Okay, and 2/3 of the total recoil, just now we have mentioned of the 1/3 of the total recoil. The 2/3 of the total recoil is actually provided by this fluid in the alveolus. Inside alveoli we have this fluid that is actually continuously moistening the surface, at the same time interfacing with the air, so the surface tension of the fluid lining the alveoli is always trying to collapse it. Okay, so basically inward force we are actually having two inward force. That is, first 1/3 is actually provided by this elastin and collagen fibers, and 2/3 is actually being provided by this fluid in the alveolus. Next, we are going to talk about the outward force. Okay, the outward force is actually the force which is opposing to the first force, that is the inward force. The outward force is solely, okay, remember, the outward force is solely brought upon by this rib cage. Okay, when you are actually inhaling, rib cage move outwards, upwards and outwards. Okay, this outwards movement is actually provided by this rib cage. So then only your lungs actually can expand, volume increases, pressure decreases, air actually can come in. Okay. So those are the two forces that actually acts on the lung, inward force as well as outward force. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next diagram, which is this diagram. Okay, so as you can see here, this one is actually the alveolus, this one is actually the lungs. Forgot to draw this visceral pleura here. And this one is the black lining is actually the parietal pleura, and in between visceral pleura and parietal pleura we will always have this pleural cavity. So, okay, just now I forgot to mention that the pleural fluid, okay, as you can see here, the pleural fluid here is always subjected to both opposite force, that is inward force as well as outward force. So, the pleural pressure which is normally addressed is always -5 cm H2O, or roughly around -5 cm H2O here. That means it is always lower than atmospheric pressure. Okay, since we have talked about the pleural cavity here, okay, just now we say that here is around -5 cm H2O. So at rest it is always -5 cm H2O. What about this alveolar pressure? We actually have two types of pressure when we are actually talking about transpulmonary pressure. That is pleural pressure, intrapleural pressure, as well as the alveolar pressure. Intrapleural pressure at rest is always -5 cm H2O, and alveolar pressure, that is the pressure inside alveolus, is always 0 cm H2O. Why? Because let's say you exhale normally, then you actually stop. So that air inside your lungs is actually referred to as functional residual capacity. So at this point, the glottis is open and the alveolar pressure is 0 cm H2O. Okay, now we are going to talk about what are the pressures, what are the different type of pressures that is like along our respiratory tract. The first and the most important one that we are going to talk about is the transpulmonary pressure. What is actually being meant by transpulmonary pressure? Okay, basically when you are actually inhaling, the chest is actually pulling the cavity outwards. The cavity has a negative pressure which is actually pulling the lungs outward, and the lungs will eventually pull outwards, causing the alveolus to pull open. This is very important in maintaining the inflation of the alveolus. So the transpulmonary pressure, the function of this transpulmonary pressure is actually to maintain the inflation of the alveolus, and this is actually calculated by the pressure of the alveolus minus pressure of the intrapleural cavity. Okay, pressure of the alveolus minus pressure of the intrapleural cavity, then you will actually get the transpulmonary pressure. We also have two other types of pressure, that is transrespiratory pressure, which is actually referring to the actual flow of, which I didn't write it here, I didn't draw it here, but this is just for additional information. Transrespiratory pressure is actually referring to the actual flow of gas from the mouth into alveolus or vice versa, and it is actually calculated by the pressure in the mouth minus pressure in the alveolus. And the second other pressure that I am going to talk about is transthoracic pressure, which is the total pressure required to expand and contract the lungs as well as the chest wall, and this is actually calculated by the pressure of alveolus minus pressure of the body surface. Okay, so now we have talked about both these diagrams here. Now we are going to talk about what happens, what are the changes in pressure, transpulmonary pressure. Okay, I have abbreviated here as a TP here, then here also I have put it as a TP. Okay, what are the changes in the transpulmonary pressure when we are actually inspiring as well as expiring? So during inspiration, what happens is the chest opens up, which pulls the pleura. The pressure inside the pleural cavity is transmitted inwards and the lungs are actually pulled outwards. So what happens here is the alveoli will pull open because the volume increase and the pressure decrease. Normally the pressure in the alveolus will reduce from the 0, which is actually at rest here, to -1 cm², and this process allows 500 milliliter of air to enter. So as you can see from this diagram here, the alveolar pressure is -1 cm², and this one is negative. Pleural pressure will drop down to -7.5 cm². Then when you actually subtract this from this, you will actually get 6.5 cm². So the more positive the transpulmonary pressure, the more volume of air that you actually take in. Okay, so that is all for inspiration. Now I'm going to talk about expiration. What happens in expiration? During expiration, the chest compresses and recoils, and the pleura is pushed upwards. Pressure inside the pleural cavity starts to increase, and therefore the transpulmonary pressure will become less positive. This will reduce the volume of alveolus, which means alveolus is actually compressed at this point, and therefore air is exhaled out of lungs. Okay, as you can see here, what happens? It reverts back to this normal. Okay, alveolar pressure drops to increase to 0 cm². Pleural pressure increases back to 5 cm². When you actually minus, you will actually get 5 cm² here, which is actually lesser than this one. So the less positive the transpulmonary pressure, which that means you will actually start to exhale the air right now. So that is for expiration. So what happens when you actually expiring forcefully? When there is a forced exhalation, what happens is the alveolar pressure will not stay at 0 cm² anymore. You will start to go beyond that. Okay, you will start to go to, let's say here is 5 cm², and the pleural pressure will also start to increase, and it will actually become 4 cm². So now it has become less positive. Okay, here the transpulmonary pressure is only 1 cm². 5 minus 4 is only 1 cm². Okay, sorry, 5 minus 1 is only 4 cm². So this 4 cm² is lesser than this 5 cm². That means you are actually exhaling more. So that's all for this video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe to this video. Thank you.